Susan, thanks for joining me. We're going to have a little discussion for Cayuga Hospitality. How you doing today?
I am excellent. And you?
I'm doing fantastic. Great start of the week. It's beautiful outside. Hey, I'm looking forward to a fantastic week and a great discussion here in a few minutes.
Awesome.
So let's talk about cracking the startup code. Okay, so we're going to talk about innovative ways to capture the hospitality market. So I'm going to dive right in. I've got Susan Berry. She's Queen Bee, Hive Marketing, and an incredible host at the amazing Top Floor podcast, by the way. So thanks for joining us.
Oh my gosh, it's such a pleasure to be here. And I think it'll be interesting to talk about this. I definitely have some ideas for startups who are interested in breaking into the hospitality vertical, but I'm guessing that you probably do too. So hopefully I can turn the tables and ask the questions to you as well.
Super. I can't wait to dive in.
You can't wait to be put on the spot, huh?
Hey, why not? I'm a glutton for punishment. So let's do it. So what are some challenges that hospitality startups in particular are facing right now?
I think that's the number one piece is approaching the industry without understanding the franchise owner, manager, operator structure and not bothering to figure it out because it's very unusual and atypical to other vertical segments. And if you don't understand that, you're going to spend a lot of time as a salesperson for a startup spinning your wheels, talking to the wrong people, and thinking that you're making this fantastic headway when in fact, you have completely wasted your time.
So on point there. I'm admittedly an outsider. I always talk about this. I've never worked at a hotel. There are so many things that are unique, so many intricacies and details. And you'd mentioned even just the structure. It is so difficult to even understand ownership, management companies, and then people at the property level. You're not even sure who's making decisions, right?
It's absolutely true. And in fact, I was going to ask you about that because I know that you came from outside of the industry and had to break in. Did you run into any problems with that sort of ownership structure or who was the real decision maker? Or was it easier because you were working on behalf of individual properties?
I broke into the industry here as a lowly graphic designer here in San Diego. I cold called my beloved John Davies, just retired from Benchmark Pyramid, began working in print, him at the property level, understanding he was making decisions at the property level on food and beverage and menus and things like that. But when it came to larger picture items, brand positioning, advertising, those decisions typically came from different people. It took me a long time to figure out how all that went together. Didn't realize understand that the relationship between him, Noble House, which was the collection they were with at the time.
Oh yeah.
And then that went to the owners, and the owners are very hands-on, very vision forward thinking, where then I found some of the ownerships that are more of a fund or a portfolio investment are not hands-on. So it's so interesting, but so convoluted on figuring out who those key decision makers are.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the thing about some ownership groups being really just focused on the real estate value or focused on the real estate side versus the operation.
Yep.
Because I think that's another key piece of information that people from outside of the industry don't know that is, again, a little bit different from a typical, maybe typical is not the right word, but other vertical segments. And that is that hotels are two businesses at the same time. They are a cash flowing business with daily receipts and money coming in, money going out each and every day. But then they are also real estate investments that you spend a bunch of money and then 5 to 10 years later, you extract that value and presumably, hopefully make a profit. And so depending on the owner's interest, like what their goal is with the investment, they may be more or less interested in the cash flow piece. So the thing about the difference between cash flow and real estate value is that you as a vendor or as a partner have no insight into what those goals are. You just have to know that they exist, right? Like you have to know it's possible that they could care more about A, B, or C. I'm again going to turn it back around on you and ask you this, particularly when you started working with hotels. Were you surprised at how budget conscious they were or weren't? I get the sense that people who haven't worked in hotels before think that they are just like these big, high margin, high dollar operations. And I think the margin is much slimmer than most people would understand. And so it always seems like a surprise when people are like, what do you mean you can't pay $200 for this? Do you know what I mean? Was that the same for you, or did you luck into like really fancy hotels that could just throw money at you?
It's so funny you brought that point up about two different types of ownership. One
Mhm.
that is a real estate play, and the other is a cash flowing business. And you perfectly illustrated, because I had that same experience after starting my career with somebody that was passionate about hospitality. It's a family extremely hands-on. They're very passionate about delivering an exceptional guest experience. They're still that way. They're an incredible portfolio of hotels. Working closely with them, I always assumed everybody that owned a hotel had a passion to deliver that same experience. Working with other ownership groups, I don't think even around anymore, but they were all in on real estate play and didn't necessarily focus so much on delivering a top level guest experience, even though they had luxury properties under their portfolio.
Interesting.
Couldn't understand those. And I can't imagine a vendor from the outside looking in and realizing, yes, these people are pushing back at a $200 purchase versus somebody would always consider something even high level budget if it was able to elevate that experience and make something exceptional. So very good point. Absolutely.
Yeah, just totally different priorities, I guess.
Totally.
I think there's one other thing to mention on these common challenges, and it's specific to hospitality and travel tech startups. So, not every startup, but the ones that are focused on technology. And that is that hotels have so many different systems. And so often those have been spackled and patched together versus built as a unified tech stack. And so the integration of a new piece of technology into an existing tech stack in a hotel is not a simple thing. It's not a matter of, oh, we'll just call the and boop, we're done. It's often incredibly complicated, incredibly time consuming. And there are some vendors in this space who run literal years of lag time in finalizing integrations. So be aware that if you need integrations with other systems, you better have done your homework, legwork, prayer, lighting candles, and every other thing that you can think of to make it work.
You are so on right there. And I talked about this on my last interview, is any barrier is going to create resistance. Think about the concept of hoteliers using OTAs, third parties. They'll pay a commission up front, take the pain up front, and not necessarily look at the long-term effects of what they could have saved on the back end. I see a lot of short-sightedness. And if you're going to create some sort of disruption or onboarding or a learning curve that may take your team down for a little bit, even though it may result in a longer time play, be aware that resistance or that barrier may be very extreme in hospitality, as it might not necessarily be so, because you are disrupting a lot of things. The hotel's a 24/7 business. It doesn't shut doors, right? So that little ripple of disruption, it may seem insignificant to somebody that's trying to break in the market, but look at this from a GM's or anybody else perspective, that they don't necessarily like to take the pain up front. They'll maybe a little bit more on the back end. So
yes, that makes total sense.
Yes. Why is it so hard to sell to the hospitality industry these days?
I think everything that we talked about needs to go on that list. But there's something else that is a little bit hard for me to articulate. So I'm going to talk in circles for a second. And
Nice. I
we'll
love
see if
it.
I make any sense by the end. Okay, so the hotel business is essentially an apprenticeship business, meaning, at least in the US, more value is placed on having had experience than having education. You are learning from the person who came before you, who learned from the person who came before her, right?
Yep.
It's like the sort of olden days when a blacksmith would take an apprentice and teach him how to make shoes for horses or whatever blacksmiths do. I'm not sure. And so because of that, it's a little impenetrable to learn the lingo and the culture of the hotel business, because it's not like a course that you can take and just be like, oh, okay, I get it. Because even though there are excellent hospitality programs, they don't often always match up to the reality of the apprenticeship way that people are being taught to operate. I don't know if I made sense with what I just said.
All kinds of sense. The terminology. And to support your claim, I oftentimes was reluctant to say, as an outsider, I've not worked at hotels, but ironically, a lot of people I'm realizing in this tech space right now that we're talking about, a lot of other people, including Nick Horgan, I just mentioned, he's never worked at a hotel, but he's an absolute expert in this space. However, if you haven't hung around the industry, you don't know people, there's terms that are used in the industry that aren't used in any place else, which can make you feel like an outsider. So absolutely, there's not like a hospitality's.
Or even if there is, it doesn't make sense. Like you can't just memorize the vocabulary and then start using it. There's a little bit of a secret handshake feel to the whole deal. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
And I think for that, the way startup can overcome that is to engage a guide. Find someone who is so embedded in the industry and can be your guide, and whether formally or informally help answer those questions and show you the way to learn the secret handshake.
You know what? You took a page right out of the interview I had with Nick Horgan. Amaze Insights, one of their secrets to their success, they immediately brought on people that are heavy hitters in the industry to navigate and open those doors, because it can be so, they don't have the secret handshake.
Exactly.
So surrounding yourself that people that have done it before and are able to navigate those barriers, because it might sound like a broken record. I'm sure you do. The word relationship is thrown around in these podcasts rather frequently, but it's everything. Mm-hmm. If you don't have those relationships, it is so much more difficult, and it can get frustrating, and the thought of giving up and the feel of being defeated is pretty high.
I will tell you, on the flip side of that, I think that our industry, our hospitality and hotel industry, relies a lot on relationships, but I also think it's a business where it is easy to make good relationships.
Yes.
I don't think that it's as hard as, I don't know, being an investment banker where you have these years and years that you're like trying to find high net worth people and you put in all this work. You can establish a good relationship with a peer in our business quickly because we're hospitable, we're friendly, and we want to make relationships with each other.
Absolutely. And as I'm finally reading the book, How to Make Friends and Influence People, the biggest thing to doing that is making people feel important and making them the hero. So if you were trying to forge those relationships in hospitality, yes, Cayuga, that are always a great resource to reach out. There's always people there that are there to help be part of the conversation. Biggest networking events going on right now as we speak on LinkedIn. Don't wait for an in-person event. conversations are going on right now, make great friends. So that would be another great suggestion for someone that's trying to forge relationships in hospitality, and what better place to make connections if you can't do it in person.
100%.
Yes. What are some of the biggest misconceptions about the industry?
There are two that just immediately jump into my mind. Number one is that Marriott owns Marriott hotels and Hilton owns Hilton hotels, etc. We've already talked about the sort of intricacies of ownership and management companies and brands, but it remains true that the general public believes that if they see a Courtyard by Marriott, that the Marriott company owns that particular piece of real estate. Could not be further from the truth. So if I were a startup, that would be the very first thing I taught every person who came to work with me to understand that ownership structure. And then the second thing is, it's related to what you were saying, Corey, about different priorities for different owners, that some are really focused on the guest experience, some are really focused on real estate asset value, and maybe never the twain shall meet. And it's this thing of, if you can show a hotel how much better it would be with your particular product or service, that it would be obvious to them that they would buy it. Every hotel does not have the same priority. So even if you can prove that you're going to increase guest satisfaction by 1,000,000%, it doesn't always matter. There's one last thing I will say, and that is, I think sometimes, Tom, I'm so interested in what you think about this. Sometimes outside people coming into the hospitality space vastly overestimate how technically savvy and sophisticated our industry is. Now, of course, there are many savvy and sophisticated people in the hotel business. What do you think?
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. The legacy systems that these people are using, in fact, I'm going to get back to sales and marketing. One of the biggest things that I encumbered is even the definition of the word lead in this industry. The word lead in this industry, in hospitality, at the property level, is entirely different than every other industry out there.
Oh, that's such a good point. Yes, totally
every
true.
other. And when you throw the word lead out there, just to quickly define it, on the hotel side, that means that somebody has sent you an inquiry or an RFP. That is a lead to somebody in hotel sales. Every other, including SaaS, technology, a lead means anyone or any person that has shown any level of interest in or your product or service. That is vastly different from those two environments. That took me a while to figure out. Okay, so what are some of the best tips hospitality startups could engage with right now? I know you got a few of them.
I definitely have a few, many that we've already talked about, but it bears repeating. So my best tips for hospitality, technology, and other startups are, if you are not already hospitality insiders, find yourself a guide. Whether that is a formal relationship, an informal relationship, a full-time employee, a consultant, whomever it is, find and prioritize someone who can guide you through the industry, because no matter how smart you are, there are some strange mysteries ahead and you are going to need a guide. Second is, and this is not rocket surgery, what I'm about to say, but I think it applies to everyone, not just startups. Show value before you ask for business. Show some kind of benefit or value, whether it's in your conversation, in your content that you're putting out. I see this happen on LinkedIn pretty frequently, where people will do a post and then put a call to action in it. So if you want to buy this thing, blah, 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 blah. That is not a sales conversation on LinkedIn. That's a networking and informational conversation. So don't confuse those two. Give value. Don't ask for business when you're not in a sales conversation. And then I think the third thing is You talked about HSMAI, which is an excellent organization. There are lots of organizations to join, but I would say don't just join, don't just give money or sponsor. Find one and go deep and participate. So rather than joining every single hotelier association that's out there, pick one, but get really involved. Make an effort and get to know people, volunteer, all that stuff. I think that'll make a big difference.
Love that. Love that. One of my biggest tips right now, create the most amazing website experience that immediately solves a pain point. The moment somebody goes to your website, I snoop as a diehard creative, and I'm blown away on how many websites I go to, and I'm like, I have no idea what this, and I consider myself relatively savvy in terms of tech, but I'm like, I'm lost. I'm just absolutely bombarded by feature dumping and benefits. Come out and solve a specific acute pain point that is troubling the industry. They're going to come check your website out. And I can't urge anybody to spend the money to create something that's going to immediately inject, wow, that's interesting. I need to learn more about that.
What do you think about putting pricing on a website?
I think that is an absolute great idea. It's going to eliminate the tire kickers, wasted time. If those people aren't ready to buy yet, you want to use your website to create an experience where they can make an informed decision where they're going to reach out to sales at that bottom 3 to 5% when they're ready to buy. I don't know why people think maybe they get a conversation, they can overcome the pricing. Believe me, if you solve an acute pain point and the pain is severe enough, they'll find the money.
Yes.
Right?
100%. And they may be like small companies like mine where I'm super interested. I already have been convinced that I want to buy. I just need to know how much money I need to save up.
There you go. Exactly. Really good point. So I'm assuming you agree with that.
1,000%. However, I don't have prices on my website. Do you have them on yours?
And on parts of our SharpSpring engagements, we do. Everything else is not a deliverable widget or that you're selling a Frisbee. So
that's why I have like a boilerplate service that I offer, but then every single customer I work with, every one of our clients has some sort of customization within that boilerplate. So it would be really hard for me to put a price out there because then client A looks and is, what are you doing? That's way less than what I pay for, without realizing that they're getting like 9 times this service. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yes. One last tip, and I know we touch on it really quickly. Be engaged on LinkedIn and put out valuable content that's relevant to your product, not salesy, but something that is value and entertainment. Build your network, create conversations, just like you would in person. You wouldn't go to an MPI event, walk up to somebody and pitch slap them with your You would stop with small talk. How are they? Nice to meet you. Treat it the same way as you would in person. And so I think being engaged on LinkedIn adds tremendous amount of value there as well.
I totally agree.
Susan, what are you up to now and where can people find you, by the way?
So the best place to find my favorite project that I'm always working on is the Top Floor Podcast, which is at topfloorpodcast.com or on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And then you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm Susan Berry on LinkedIn.
Love it. Thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Have a great rest of the week.
You too.